Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 16th November 2016. The first article is related to searching for an equilibrium. We all know that constitution is the supreme law of the land, and supremacy of the constitution need to be maintained through judicial review. The Supreme Court can declare any law or rule as null and void if it violates the constitution. In this context, the judicial review is also been criticized as a source of judicial activism. So, in this context, the judicial activism, is it good or bad and why is it coming? That is the central theme of this article. Now, the judiciary has to protect the rights of the citizens, especially the liberties, freedoms of the right and other rights of the citizens. They need to be protected through judicial actions. So, the interpretation of various rights by the Supreme Court has led to their enlargement. You talk about right to food, right to work, everything is due to liberal interpretation of our rights under the Constitution by the Supreme Court. Added to that, two landmark judgments if you see. One is related to Menaka Gandhi, the other one is Markandeya. In Menaka Gandhi judgment, the Supreme Court has clearly stated that the rights under Article 14, 19 and 21, they are connected and they cannot be separated from each other. It has given a very positive interpretation of the word liberty. Previously, liberty is seen as a very narrow sense that it is lack of physical restraint of the citizens. And when we connected the liberty with freedoms and equality, liberty is seen as in a positive light, which has led to the rapid expansion of the scope of Article 21, right to food and right to have a livelihood. All these have come into existence because of this Menaka Gandhi judgment. And the later is, in the Markandeya judgment, the Supreme Court has clearly stated that the conscience of the Constitution is directive principles of the state policy. Because of this, the social and economic rights got broadened. And further to this, on the other side of the argument, if you see, the judicial activism came into existence because of the failure or non-performance of the other institutions. So in this scenario, the loss of integrity and confidence of the people in the political class is the reason for the people to look for judiciary. So in this scenario, the expectations on the judiciary is increasing, and the judiciary fails to manage these expectations will lead to cynicism in the country. And already we have seen that judiciary has its own challenges and problems. This increased workload or burden, how the judiciary manages, is a big question. And second thing is, the judicial activism will further erode the confidence of the people in these institutions. And finally, it has been clearly stated that if one institution erodes the power of the other institutions, that leads to a new style of despotism. And in the parliamentary democracy, the theme is this: the people representatives have to take forward their sovereignty. So the people will apply their sovereignty through their representatives and they shall make the decisions for them. Now, appointed judges making the judgments, it is not in the spirit of democracy, that's what has been said. On the positive side, if you see, now the judicial review power, it maintains the rule of law, strength of democracy, etc. Now, the ignorant mob cannot replace well knowledgeable and well read, reason based judgments of the experienced judges. This is the second argument. The Constitution itself has provided that the rights of the citizens has to be protected through the action of the judiciary. And the democracy does not mean the work of majority. So there is every chance that the representative democracy may become the work of the majority. In this context, the views, opinions, and rights of the minority need to be protected with the judiciary as the central institution. These are the points in favor of the judicial review. So these are being expressed over here. Now, a good trend is growing in Indian judiciary that judiciary itself is applying the self-restraint. Especially in dealing with the policy decisions of the government, a clear self-restraint is available in the judiciary. The Supreme Court of India has given directions to the subordinate judiciary that to the possible extent they have to restrain themselves from interfering with executive action or executive decisions with regard to the policy exercise, which is its own prerogative. So this is about equilibrium, finding for a golden mean with the functioning of three different institutions of the state, that is executive, legislature and judiciary. Now, let us see the article that is back to collegium. Now, with regard to this article, let us remember this statement. If the institutions of the nation, if they are in conflict on the procedures rather than on the principles, that appears too shallow to public. The very conflict between the executive and judiciary with regard to the appointment of judges is not in the spirit of public welfare. So, in this context, sound functioning institutions are critical for democracy. So, they need to be upheld and respected. An independent judiciary is critical for the same. So, here, the appointment of judges across the world has the role of the executive. But in India, the first judge's case, the second judge's case, and third judge's case, if we observe, progressively the collegium has come into existence. It has taken away the executive prerogative. Now, the Chief Justice of India and the senior-most judges, four senior-most judges, they will send the recommendations to the executive. And if executive has some objections, they have to refer it back to the collegium. And collegium reiterates that those judges need to be appointed. Then executive has no choice but to take the things forward. In this context, executive to take a role in appointment of judges, it has passed the NJAC Act, National Judicial Appointments Commission Act, and it was declared as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. But in the process, it has said there shall be a memorandum of procedure which has to be framed to make the functioning of the collegial system more transparent and inclusive. In this scenario, the appointment of the judges delayed never before, and Chief Justice of India has complained that it is leading to or it is bringing the judicial work to the grinding halt. So, the Supreme Court has recommended for 77 positions. Finally, the government has agreed for the 34 and the remaining 43 were sent for a reconsideration of the collegium. Now, as for the existing procedure, if the collegium reiterates them, the government has no option but to appoint them. Now, here, already the judicial work is said to be tardy in India, and almost 44% of the judicial positions are vacant. And the present status quo or present conflict between executive and judiciary is worsening this situation further. So, as quick as possible, both the institutions have to find a way out from this mess, and it is very much necessary in the functioning of our democracy. Now, gathering Team Trump. Now, here, remember a statement. Elections are different and governance is different. The electoral rhetoric and whatever the populism played during the elections will finally give way for the mediation of the conflicts and practical wisdom in governance. During the election, you may play to the tune of certain sections of the voters, but once you get elected, you have to serve all the citizens. So that's the reason why the governance is said to be essentially a continuum. The politics might change. So, Mr. Trump won the elections, but he has to serve the liberal Democrats and conservatives who supported him equally. The present appointment of Mr. Priebus and Shannon as chief of staff and chief strategist of his government and chief advisor is an effort towards balancing the two. Mr. Priebus is known to be liberal and Mr. Shannon known to be conservative. So a median ground will be found somewhere in the governance of the country. That's what is reflected in the appointment of the people by the President-elect Mr. Trump. Now let's get into the next paper. That is perspective. Coordinates of safety. This is the article which I liked the most today. Now, you all know that the violence against the woman is prevalent everywhere. Then what are the factors that are determining the violence against the woman? The first thing you know is the wealth, affluence of a society. Now, My point is this: whatever the factors determining the violence of against the woman is the interplay of multiple things. What I mean by the interplay of multiple things, it is affluence, urban population, the social considerations in the society, substance abuse, governance, all the interplay of this thing that depict as a violence against the woman. Now, if you see from 2000 to 2015, the statistics clearly show that the violence against the woman is increasing. But however, let us see these things. One is affluence of the societies is growing. Now, as the affluence grows, 1% of GDP increase will reduce the incidence of violence against the woman by 0.4%. But however, affluence is not the sole determining factor, so it can be obscured by the other factors too. Sex ratio. As the sex ratio increases, better off, it will reduce the violence against the woman by 6%. It means 1% rise in sex ratio, betterment of sex ratio, has 6 times the impact. So, if you take Delhi, though the affluence is high, the worst sex ratio can be cited as a reason for the violence in Punjab and Haryana and surrounding Delhi. And the next is the economic status of the women and educational levels. Especially the economic and educational levels, they provide for the bargaining power of the woman in the family, and also they give her an exit choice from an existing relationship. Now, if woman is not employed, irrespective of her status in the family, she still continues to remain there. So, generally the educational levels will have decreased violence against the woman. Now, there is one small incidence here. Now, when a woman is working in the family and the man is jobless, there is increased violence among the families. That's what I can say it as patriarchal ego smashing or something I can call it as. So it means a person wants to keep his dominance on the woman, saying that are using the physical violence against her. And coming to the cultural values in a society and the factors of religion, this article says Hinduism has got greater violence against the woman compared to other religions. The major reason is the caste, and also the major reason is dowry. And coming to the rural and urban areas, the rural women are more subjected to violence, are more victimized. The reason being is the caste dominance and caste based violence, women are the victims. And added to that, the dowry based violence is also very much prevalent in the rural areas. And coming to exposure to media, it has been clearly stated that media will have a crime deterrence effect. The more the media is being exposed to, the crime is going to come down for less. And finally, governance. All these factors are one side, and governance is on the other side of the thing. Unless governance is improved, it can nullify the betterment in all these factors. So now, if you say from this in this decade, the violence against the women has increased in spite of betterment in all these factors. Why? It is due to the poor governance, especially in the urban areas. So these are the various things which can be explained again as for the violence against the woman. Assisting the injured. It is about Good Samaritan law. Now, here you need to remember an NGO, that is Save the Life Foundation. Now, I told you in my class that whenever you write an answer, you need to quote the examples and various reports. Any issue related to health, you need to quote the WHO reports. With regard to the road accidents in India, understand that it is going to be the major cause of untimely death in the country by 2020. It is going to be the single largest killer in the country. So, what is the major reason for the death in road accidents? Understand that whenever a person is being facing a road accident, there is something called golden hour. If the first aid is been provided during this golden hour, the chances of survival are very high. But however, the people are reluctant to do the same. Now, a software engineer, Miss Swati, got killed on the broad daylight in Chennai. But none of them have come to rescue the girl, the reason being the victimization of these rescuers from law. So, in these circumstances, the bystanders can go and help the victims. There are guidelines the Supreme Court has asked the government to frame. These are called Good Samaritan guidelines. In my previous videos, I spoke about these Good Samaritan guidelines. It means whatever the statement given by the person who has provided for the first aid or provided taken him to a person to a hospital, they cannot be questioned. Whatever the statement given by them, they shall be accepted, and they shall not be called for the police station and for the statement again unless they are willing to. So, like that, the legal victimization will be done away with as per the new guidelines framed. The Karnataka already formed the Good Samaritan law, and other states are expected to follow. But, however, there is a psychological barrier, because for these many years we have heard this particular thing. You will get into unnecessary legal tussles. Now, the situation has changed. It needs to be properly communicated to the people in this context. Now, coming to with regard to demonetization, everywhere the news is related to demonetization, and we have discussed enough on demonetization, and we need not discuss that again. Now, coming to India, Israel to scale up counter-terror cooperation. You know that Israel President Mr. Rivlin is visiting India, and it is 25 years of establishing the diplomatic ties between these two countries. As I said to you before, as and when the governments changes, the relations with the Israel face up and down, especially with regard to the formal visits. NDA has known for the formal visits between these two countries. But however, whatever the government is, the defense and technological cooperation, especially in agriculture, is growing with Israel. So now, this visit is going to lay ground for the Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel, and generally, the strong relations with Israel is seen as a contempt by the Islamic countries, especially in the Middle East. Now, India needs to balance the interests of the country in the Middle East and also with Israel. Israel is going to be the major defense partner for India very soon. And coming to US could join China's Belt and Road Initiative. So, with regard to this, President Obama has opposed to join Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Now, Mr. Trump may see a positive light and may be willing to join this. You can see it as a major diplomatic failure because many of the NATO partners of United States of America have joined AIIB in spite of US recommending them not to join. Now, US will also come and join this. Probably it will provide for greater integration of the world and better trade prospects. Now, let's come to the main page. Again, Telangana to prune expenditure. Now, I want to say you this. The demonetization drive has worst effect on the state governments, especially the land registration, sales tax, and the vehicle registration and exercise on alcohol. These are the revenues for the state government. So as the sales dropped, the sales tax revenues are dropped. There are no registrations and there is no liquor sale. That is the reason why the economy of the states is going to go on a downward spiral. So how they have to be compensated is the major question over here. Now coming to my notes. So gathering Team Trump, what I said to you is emotional and electional rhetoric has to be replaced by wisdom and the needs of the governance after the elections. That's how the team has to be formed. And the second, back to collegium. What did I say? Any conflict among the institutions shall be on principles, not on the procedures. And these principles need to be established through a consensual approach, reconciliatory approach in the long-term interests of the nation. And with regard to searching for an equilibrium, the judicial activism may not be in the good interests of the nation. The equilibrium need to be found by the judiciary itself. The recent directions of the Supreme Court towards the self-restraint is a welcome sign. And coming to the next page. Now, crime against the woman. It is involved with multiple factors related to this, an interplay of the multiple factors, and we studied them here. And coming to the other things are related to assisting the injured, you need to focus on what are the guidelines with regard to the Good Samaritan law. So these are the articles which we have discussed today, and thank you very much and all the best.